I am 21 years old. A few years ago, I took a house-sitting job for a wealthy family. It was a massive, modern two-story house in an isolated, high-end suburb. The properties were heavily wooded and spaced far apart. You couldn't even see the neighbors through the trees. It was my second night watching the place. Around 1 a.m., I was in the kitchen. I decided to make a cup of coffee to stay awake and watch some movies. As the coffee machine was running, I looked down and noticed the heavy wooden utensil drawer was pulled open about an inch. I didn't remember opening it, but I just pushed it shut. I looked out the kitchen window toward the backyard. The back porch security light was off. I flipped the switch on the wall. Nothing happened. I unlocked the back door and stepped out onto the porch to see if the bulb was burned out. I reached up and touched the glass casing. The bulb was completely unscrewed. Someone had deliberately twisted it loose so the deck would stay dark. I tightened the bulb. The light flickered on, illuminating the empty yard. I went back inside immediately and threw the deadbolt. I poured my coffee, walked into the living room, and set the mug down on the coffee table. I sat down on the couch and grabbed the TV remote. Right as I turned the TV on, I heard a loud thud. It came from the second floor, right above my head. The house was dead quiet, so the impact sounded heavy. I stood up. I walked to the front door and grabbed the aluminum baseball bat I kept leaning against the wall. I gripped it tight and walked up the stairs, keeping my weight on the edges of the steps so the wood wouldn't creak. I checked the guest bedrooms. Empty. I walked to the end of the hall. The master bedroom door was pushed open. The room was freezing. I stepped inside and turned on the light. The large casement window on the far wall was wide open. The wind was blowing hard through the screen. Lying on the hardwood floor, directly beneath a tilted floating shelf, was a massive hardcover dictionary. The wind had blown the window open and knocked the heavy book off the shelf. I let out a massive breath. I actually laughed a little at myself. Just the wind. I walked over, shut the window, locked the metal latch, and picked up the book. I walked back downstairs. I put the bat back by the front door. I walked into the living room, sat back down on the couch, and reached out to grab my coffee off the table. My hand hit empty air. I looked at the table. The coffee mug was gone. I frowned, thinking maybe I had left it on the kitchen counter. Then I looked down at the floor. Right next to the coffee table, stamped clearly onto the clean hardwood, was a wet, muddy boot print. I stopped breathing. I looked closer. There was a whole trail of them. The muddy prints started at the front hallway coat closet, right next to where I had just put the bed. They tracked through the living room, passed directly in front of the couch where I was sitting, and ended at the basement door. The basement door was now pushed open about 2 inches. The space behind it was pitch black. The realization hit me all at once. The intruder hadn't just broken in. They had been in the house this entire time. They were outside earlier in mud, unscrewing the porch light. They slipped in through the front door before I locked up and hid in the coat closet. The book falling upstairs was a complete coincidence. But while I was upstairs checking the bedrooms with my bed, they walked out of the closet. They walked right past my couch. They picked up my mug of hot coffee and they went down into the basement. I didn't yell. I didn't move toward the basement door. I stood up from the couch. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes locked on that 2-inch gap in the basement door. My car keys were sitting on the kitchen island. I grabbed them. I quietly unlocked the front door, stepped out into the driveway, and sprinted to my car. I got inside, hit the power locks, and immediately dialed 911. The police arrived in under 4 minutes. 3 cruisers blocked the driveway. Officers went inside with flashlights and guns drawn.
Copy 502 on the scene.
I sat in my locked car and waited. 20 minutes later, an officer walked out to my car. He told me the house was clear. The basement window had been forced open and broken from the inside. Whoever was down there had run off into the woods the second they heard the sirens. But the police found something else in the basement. Tucked into a dark, unfinished corner behind the furnace, there was a dirty sleeping bag and a pile of food wrappers. The person had been living down there since before I even started the house-sitting job. And sitting perfectly upright on the concrete floor, right next to the sleeping bag, was my coffee mug. It was completely empty. They drank it while sitting in the dark, listening to me walk around upstairs.